Hey guys, I'm here with one of the most requested topics for Technicality ever. Let's get technical. I am a student. That's pretty obvious, but more specifically, I am a high school student, and seeing that it is now September, us high schoolers and really students all over are in full-on back-to-school mode. And you know what that means. Standardized tests. The tests I personally have to start working on are the PSATs, the SATs, the ACTs, subject tests, and AP exams. Man, just saying all of those is overwhelming. While I have to get ready for those tests, other students around the US are getting ready for theirs. Public school students have to take 112 standardized tests from pre-kindergarten to the time they graduate high school, which is nearly 8 a year. And it's that many tests that can make a student go, why? So here's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna take a deep dive into standardized testing, ultimately concluding that standardized testing, or the system of evaluating students we have in the status quo, is an inaccurate and harmful system. To do this, though, we have to look at both sides of the issue to truly grasp both arguments. I think a logical place to start, though, is to answer that student's question. Why? Why do we have all these standardized tests? Where did they come from? Early standardized tests were based off Army IQ tests known as alpha and beta tests. The test was sort of a placement test for the Army. Your score would supposedly tell you where you would fit best. In January 2002, George W. Bush, along with bipartisan Congress support, passed the No Child Left Behind Act. The goal of NCLB was to increase America's overall ranking when it comes to education, or more specifically, math, reading, and science. To put it lightly, compared to other countries, America was not ranked at the top. Or anywhere near the top. Since the NCLB, standardized testing is now more frequent than ever. When Obama ran, he was fiercely opposed to all the standardized tests, but while president in February 2009, Race to the Top became law, which, among other things, incentivized schools that did better in standardized testing with a financial reward. Okay, so now that we're all caught up, let's dig into the benefits of standardized testing. 1. Curriculum. Because teacher pay is dependent on student scores, it makes sure that teachers actually teach what they're supposed to teach. All students get the same information, which means it's also easy for students to transition between schools if necessary without a new student being ahead or behind. It also confirms that students are being taught grade-appropriate material and not material that is too easy or too hard. 2. Progress. Standardized tests give teachers, students, and parents a good read as to where the students are in their class. Students learn about what they need to focus and improve on, teachers know what their class as a whole needs to review, and parents get a sense of how their kids are doing compared to other kids in the country or the school district, as well as how they progress over the years. 3. Objectivity. When you get a letter grade, it's likely that some amount of subjectivity is involved, whether that be being graded on a curve, which means being graded relative to how well other people in your class did, or just the teacher incorporating their opinion of you, or if it's a writing thing, being hit because the teacher disagrees with the arguments you put forth. For example, if a teacher really likes standardized tests, there's a possibility their perception of me won't be too great after this video. Oh no. Standardized tests take the objectivity out of grades, not only because questions are thoroughly made and reviewed by experts, but also because the robots who grade your answers have no opinionated element. 4. Skills. Standardized tests help kids develop skills like working under pressure, time management, studying, and more, skills that are helpful in real life. And finally, 5th. Government help. Because standardized test scores are public record, they allow the government and lawmakers to easily assess what actions need to be taken when it comes to schools and learning. They can see what subjects America as a whole is excelling at and what subjects need more focus and funding. Now that we've covered the most popular arguments for standardized testing, let's take a look at all the negative effects of standardized testing. But first, let's quickly rebut the affirmative arguments. A matter of fact, let's put all the affirmative arguments in a box over here, and each time I refute them, we can just cross them out like this. No, it's too dark. How about... Ha, that's better. First, on the curriculum, standardized tests don't enforce the curriculum, they restrict it. More on that later. Second, on standardized tests giving you a sense of progress, not only can you get a sense of how you're doing in a class without standardized tests, like maybe look at your grade, but this point is null because anyone who's gotten the results back from a standardized test knows that they really only give you an overall percentage. The only way you could truly get a sense of progress would be if they showed you exactly which questions you got right and which questions you got wrong. Third, on objectivity, here's a quote from fairtest.org, the National Center for Fair and Open Testing. Quote, "The only objective part of most standardized tests is scoring when done by an accurately programmed machine. Deciding on what items to include on the test, how questions are worded, which answers are scored as correct, how the test is administered, and the use of exam results are all made by subjective human beings." Fourth, on skills, don't tell me that the only way to learn stuff like time management is to take a standardized test. No, that's crazy. You can refine those skills in other ways. And finally, fifth, it's actually pretty scary that we use standardized tests to make important decisions, because, as I'm about to show, they may not be a great measure of the landscape. That being said, let's jump into the cons. 1. National rankings. Standardized tests have failed to do what the NCLB set out to achieve. From 2002 to 2009, on a test that's administered worldwide known as the Program for International Student Assessment, the United States dropped over 10 ranks in math and science with no change in reading. Oops. 2. Inaccurate measurement. Standardized tests are a terrible measure of a student's knowledge, performance, and ability. While they do test stuff like memory, they miss out on a lot of skills that are crucial to examining students. Gerald Bracey, an American education policy researcher, once said that standardized tests don't show a student's, get ready for this, quote, creativity, critical thinking, resilience, motivation, persistence, curiosity, endurance, reliability, enthusiasm, empathy, self-awareness, self-discipline, leadership, civic-mindedness, courage, compassion, resourcefulness, sense of beauty, sense of wonder, honesty, and integrity. Whew. So a lot of things. Why is this? Well, the answer is that it's hard to measure how good or how smart or just how a student is in a standard way. William Hiss, who's done research on the topic, has said, quote, the human mind is simply so complex and so multifaceted and fluid that trying to find a single measurement tool that will be reliable across the enormous populations of American students is simply a trip up a blind alley. So what do these tests measure? 3. Wealth. Above all else, standardized tests test how much money your parents make. Time after time, graph after graph, there's no refuting this. A matter of fact, one study found that, quote, the combination of 4 such variables, number of parents living at home, parents' educational background, type of community, and poverty rate, accounted for a whopping 89% of differences in state scores. Why? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at this BBC article. The thesis of it is that the 1%, instead of focusing on buying stuff that makes you seem rich, like fancy cars, expensive clothing, etc., is now focused on spending money on things that don't make you seem rich, but will progress you and your family's social status. The rich spend more money on stuff like health, retirement, and what we're interested in, education. A quote from the article, quote, education accounts for almost 6% of top 1% household expenditures, compared to just over 1% of middle-income spending. The upper class is spending money on stuff like tutors, test preps, nice schools with tons of resources, enriching after-school programs, and more, and they're getting a very clear and very valuable return. Other groups have also seen standardized tests work unfairly against them, so if that's something you're interested in, I strongly recommend this PBS Idea channel episode, which is basically a deep dive into this point. Click the eye. Also, rest in peace Idea channel, you will be missed and we will support you in your next endeavors. 4. Stress. Standardized testing is incredibly stressful, and if you don't believe me, ask literally any test-taking student, and I'm sure they'll tell you that taking a standardized test that is important and intimidating, and not to mention timed, isn't exactly the most relaxing thing ever. Standardized test? More like standardized pest, up top! This effect is known as, fittingly, test anxiety, and it likely comes from all of the pressure we as a society put on kids and kids put on themselves to do well on a test due to the inflated importance of the test. And the impacts of it can go beyond feeling bad and poor exam performance. This Business Insider article furthers, quote, children can suffer from negative thoughts such as, if I don't pass this, I will never get a good job. They can also suffer physiological symptoms such as tight muscles or trembling and distracting behaviors such as playing with a pencil. And finally, 5. Teaching to the test. Teaching to the test, or as I like to call it, is formatting your curriculum around the standardized test just so a student can get a high mark on the test. Here's a quote from this paper on the topic. Quote, a 2007 national study by the Center of Education Policy found that since 2001, 44% of school districts have reduced the time spent on science, social studies, and the arts by an average of 145 minutes per week in order to focus on reading and math. A 2007 study of 1,250 civics, social studies, and government teachers reported that 75% of respondents cited standardized tests as the reason current events were taught less frequently. A 5-year study completed by the University of Maryland in 2007 found that the pressure teachers were feeling to teach to the test since NCLB was passed has led to declines in teaching higher order thinking, in the amount of time spent on complex assignments, and in the actual amount of high cognitive content in the curriculum. Whew. 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 Why is this bad? To answer that, I'm gonna do a super cool collab with one of my favorite YouTubers. Obama, take it away, Obama.
When I look back on the great teachers who shaped my life, what I remember isn't the way they prepared me to take a standardized test. What I remember is the way they taught me to believe in myself, to be curious about the world, to take charge of my own learning so that I could reach my full potential, to inspire me, to open up a window into parts of the world I'd never thought of before. That's what good teaching is. That's what a great education is.
Thanks, Obama. If you want to see more of him, check out his YouTube channel. Wait. So, in summary, standardized testing is awful, not only because it failed to do what it set out to achieve, not only because it's an inaccurate measure of student ability, not only because it's more of a test of your zip code than your actual intelligence, not only because it's so stressful it created a whole separate category of anxiety, and not only because it negatively disrupts the curriculum, but also because we have so much riding on it, like teacher pay and school admission and more. Look, I'm not trying to argue that all tests are evil, or standardized testing is ruining education and the generation of kids who have to take them. As a matter of fact, I think that some testing is a great thing. But if you look at all the evidence against standardized testing, it's hard to deny that a change needs to be made. Thanks for watching. TFTBA, and explore on. But wait, before you head out, if you do want to explore on, I highly recommend Ken Robinson's book, Creative Schools. Ken Robinson is, of course, a wildly famous voice in education, and this book is about how to stay creative in the time of standardized tests. And you know the best way to read this book? Audible! Yep, this is an ad! Audible is the audiobook company with hundreds of thousands of titles to choose from, and if you go to technicalitystudios.com/audible by clicking the I or the link in the description and sign up for a free trial, then you get 2, that's right, not 1, but 2 free audiobooks today. Period. That's it. The worst case scenario here is you cancel after a month, get 2 free audiobooks to listen to forever, and help out Technicality. There's literally no downside. So if you want to check out Creative Schools and another book, or just 2 books of your choosing, technicalitystudios.com/audible. Thanks. This is also a collab between a bunch of ED YouTubers looking at our education system. To see some of the other videos we made, check out the playlist on screen right now or the link in the description. Thanks to patrons Dave, Emma, Juice, Kevin, Nick, Schwade, and Ryan. See you next time. We out! Boom!